Intentional, inevitable, irreversible. The Trump White House begins firing federal employees. We don't know how many. We do know this. It's day 10 of the shutdown. Next week, military pay will stop. California Democratic Congressman Mike Levin wants a way out. We discuss. Chaos, probably an overused word about President Trump. One thing, steady. Approval ratings in the low 40s. We examine why and what it might mean for Republicans and Democrats. Hello, everyone. I'm Major Garrett in Washington. Welcome to the Takeout. The federal government is awash in acronyms, letters strung together to identify an agency or legislation. Most acronyms are benign. RIF is not. RIF stands for reduction in force. If you are a federal worker, it means you are fired or are destined to be. Elon Musk and his Doge companions, we remember them, went on a bit of a RIF rager earlier this year. That led other federal employees seeing the RIFs around them to read the RIF writing on the wall and volunteer for early retirement. Combined, that has trimmed the federal workforce by about 300,000, roughly one half early retirements, the others firings. This out of a federal workforce of about 2.4 million when Trump 2.0 began. OMB is another acronym, stands for Office of Management and Budget. During a shutdown, which we now have, it is empowered to decide what operates and what doesn't. This particular OMB under President Trump has also interpreted that power to decide what stays and what goes. In the president's words, permanently. Russ, Vought, head of OMB, posted today, the RIFs have begun today. We don't know how many. We don't know which agencies are involved. Lawmakers are scrambling to try to find out. And some wonder if this is real or a scare tactic meant to build political pressure to end the shutdown. Remember, President Trump said over and over this week, when the firings did begin, Democratic programs would suffer. The Federal Employees Union that has threatened to file lawsuits to block whatever OMB unleashed today. Scare tactic or scythe, federal employees head into this weekend either anxious or potentially unemployed, their lives a bit more on edge. Also on edge, though not directly related, the stock market. All three indexes fell today. The Dow by nearly 2%, the NASDAQ by 3.5%, and the S&P by nearly 3%. All this amid new Trump trade tensions with China. For more on all of this, and it's been a very busy Friday, we turn to Natalie Brand at the White House. Natalie, what do we know and how should we describe what has gone on with OMB regarding federal employees?
Yeah, well, CBS News has confirmed from some federal employees that these notices have begun to go out, informing them that they will be fired in 60 days. Now, unclear at this point what will happen if the government reopens before then, and obviously everyone's hoping for that. We have not received a whole lot of information from administration officials, from the Office of Management of Budget, which noted that these RIFs would be substantial, but again, no details on numbers. And we've been reaching out to all the agencies. So far, we have confirmed RIFs are in the works for agencies including Health and Human Services, the Department of Education, CISA, which is the cybersecurity agency at DHS, the Treasury Department, EPA. But again, no spokesperson will give us exact numbers, and Senate staffers have not been able to get those as well. So it's unclear what we're talking about. But as you noted, federal employee unions have already filed suit saying that there are rules around how a shutdown works, how federal employment works, and that this is a violation of that. And also, notably, the Republican chair of the Senate Appropriations Committee, Susan Collins, in a statement said that, quote, arbitrary layoffs result in a lack of sufficient personnel needed to conduct the mission of the agency and to deliver essential programs. The Senate Majority Leader, John Thune, was asked about these RIFs, and he said it was inevitable given this continued shutdown, Major.
Natalie, that was great and comprehensive on all fronts of this. I really appreciate that. There's the China story that also played out today. The market downturn coinciding almost precisely with a social media post from the president about 11 a.m. Eastern today. Then we had one just moments ago. It's impossible to cover all the things that are implicated in that. but in essence, the president is saying there's some actions that he interprets as hostile from China, and he, in the not-too-distant future, will respond in kind.
That's right. The president earlier today threatened to raise tariffs in response to letters sent by China to countries and basically threatening new export controls on rare earth minerals, which, as you know, has been a big focus of the administration to try to lift those export controls. This new Truth Social post, which we just got minutes ago, ups the ante and says that starting November 1st or sooner, depending on whether any further actions or changes are taken by China, the United States of America will impose a tariff of 100% on China over and above any tariff that are currently in place. So this is developing news, breaking news at this hour, this threat of a tariff of 100%. There's no question that the president will be asked about this shortly. CBS News is the pool today, will be in the room when the president soon makes an announcement. Also notable that earlier Truth Social post by the president said that he was set to meet with Chinese President Xi on the sidelines of APEC, the Asia Pacific Economic Cooperation Forum summit coming up, and he said that maybe he will not do that at this point because of China's actions.
Natalie Brad, with all the details from the White House, I deeply appreciate it. Thank you very, very much. California Democratic Congressman Mike Levin joins me now. Congressman, always good to see you. Your reaction to the news today about the federal employee firings, do you believe they're real? Do you believe they're a scare tactic? How are you evaluating that?
Well, good to be with you, Major. Look, I think that Russ Vought is completely out of control, the budget director, and any sort of wide-scale firings are illegal and unconstitutional. Now, I thought it was very interesting in your open, something that I had not heard or seen reported elsewhere, is they're going to try to adhere to a 60-day time period before doing any of that. That answers one question, because clearly the civil service laws would require a 60-day notice, and frankly, a lot of other things be followed that this administration seems to have no desire to do. That being said, it is the Congress of the United States that makes the decisions which agencies are funded. We're supposed to work as appropriators. I'm a member of the Appropriations Committee under Article 1, Section 9, Clause 7 of the Constitution to actually fund the federal government. It is not up to the president, and definitely not up to the director of the budget office to make those decisions about how money is spent. What happens during a shutdown is the president, the executive, can determine who is essential and who is non-essential. If they're essential, they have to stay on the job without pay. If they're non-essential, they're furloughed. But in any event, they are not fired. So I see this as another threat, another attempt at intimidation, just as I saw the president say, well, we're only going to go after Democratic policy priorities or Democratic programs. Look, here's the deal. If we don't come to some sort of resolution by the middle of next week, we're going to have military go without pay. And that ought to be something that Mike Johnson and John Thune and Donald Trump all feel personally responsible for, because they control the levers of government. And Mike Johnson, if he had any backbone whatsoever, would call us into Washington next week before the 15th to vote on a bill that 150 plus of us in the House on a bipartisan basis have supported, which says very simply, Major, pay our troops. Don't allow our troops to become a bargaining chip or part of some sort of political leverage during a shutdown. It's flat out wrong. I represent, as you know, Major, here in San Diego, tens of thousands of Marines and sailors just in my district. We got to make sure they're paid.
So just for my audience's benefit, Congressman, the clerk of the House announced late this afternoon that the House will not be in session next week. There'll be no votes. There's nothing going on. So that thing you just described is not going to happen unless there's a forcing mechanism. How are you going to force it?
I wish I knew, Major. Mike Johnson seems to only care about one person, and that's Donald Trump. You know, Johnson wants to avoid the same fate that Kevin McCarthy experienced a few years ago, and that's really been Mike Johnson's biggest achievement, is not getting fired for a couple years. And look, he's not bringing us back during the middle of a government shutdown when members of the military aren't going to receive their pay because he doesn't want to swear in the newly elected Adelita Grijalva from Tucson, Arizona. Adelita Grijalva, the daughter of my dear friend Raul Grijalva, who I served with for many years, was duly elected by the people of Arizona, and they know that if she's sworn in, that she will immediately sign on to the bipartisan discharge petition, which will compel the Department of Justice to release the Epstein files. So once again, Mike Johnson puts Donald Trump's interests and wishes above all else. And I hope that Mike Johnson at some point would realize that his constituents in Louisiana, they're going to suffer the consequences if we can't come to an agreement on health care. The same with John Thune's constituents in South Dakota. They're going to suffer the consequences. And for them to say, well, we'll fix it later, we'll figure it out later, we have to figure it out now. People are getting the letters right now, Major, that their premiums are going to double next year or more. And unless we fix it, open enrollment is November. People have to pay the first bills in December. So we fix it now or it's not going to get fixed, and millions are going to get priced out of health care. It's just unconscionable.
Congressman, before I let you go, the Speaker has said over and over again the House has done its work to pay U.S. military personnel by passing a clean continuing resolution. It does not need to consider this matter anymore. It needs the Senate to pass that so the military members can get paid. How do you respond?
I say it's laughable, and he knows that it's laughable because what they did is pass a partisan funding bill that had every Republican, I think, except for one, and had, I think, one Democrat or two Democrats on the bill. So it was a totally partisan endeavor. He knew that we wanted to negotiate around health care. We wanted to extend the tax credits for those Americans who are at risk of losing their care. And he knew that we wanted some assurance, given all the tricks that the administration, Russ, Vought, are playing right now, all the things that they're doing that I would say are illegal and unconstitutional. We wanted some assurance that if we came to an agreement on health care, that would actually be a deal that the administration would stick to. That's all we're asking for. And he wouldn't even negotiate. He wouldn't have one serious meeting. I'm telling you, as an appropriator who's supposed to be on one of the conference committees that we're supposed to have a bipartisan negotiation, none of it is happening. And Mike Johnson is trying to spin it, but he's in charge. Donald Trump said in 2013, during the shutdown back then, the president of the United States needs to bring the people in the room and make a deal. And now what is he doing instead? Donald Trump is tweeting out ridiculous things, saying ridiculous things, threats, intimidation, no leadership whatsoever. And it's just a sad state of affairs, Major.
Congressman Mike Levin, Democrat from California, specifically northern San Diego County. I appreciate the time, sir, very much. Thank you. We turn now to the Middle East. Thousands of Palestinians who fled the northern region of the territory due to fighting there are returning after the ceasefire went into effect. Former United States Ambassador to Israel, Daniel Shapiro, joins me now. Mr. Ambassador, it's so good to see you. What do you think this next weekend, heading to Monday and Tuesday, are going to look like in the region, and what is your level of optimism about phase one of this Trump-articulated deal?
Major, phase one is already underway. The Israeli military has redeployed to the agreed lines. About 50% of Gaza now remains under its control outside of the urban areas. The guns have fallen silent. And then over the next 72 hours, the most important element will happen. The hostages that they still hold will be released to Israel and to their families. A significant amount of aid will flow into Gaza, much higher levels than before. Also, some Palestinian prisoners will be released. That is phase one that essentially ends the war. And you have no doubt that's going to occur? I feel highly confident that's going to occur. The agreement was that once Israel redeployed to those lines, that, excuse me, 72 hours later, the hostages would be released. That should happen by noon on Monday. Is it at all, from your perspective, Mr. Ambassador, a complicating factor that some in the region have acknowledged, and I believe the Prime Minister did today, that the remains of some of the deceased hostages may not be recoverable and may not be found? It's a complicating factor, and it could be a tragic situation for some of those families. There are 28 deceased hostages. Hamas claims not to know or not to be able to reach, not to know the whereabouts or not to be able to reach the remains of some of them. This could be true. It could also be Hamas's psychological warfare to try to leave that festering open wound as a kind of way of sticking it to Israel, even as they've largely lost this war. I don't think...
Or creating an idea of penalization for the prime minister, saying they might have died during warfare.
They will certainly make that claim in any case. So I don't think if it's a small number of such deceased hostages that are not found in this period and returned, it will derail the overall deal. A task force has been set up, the United States, Egypt, Qatar, and Turkey, to try to help identify the whereabouts of any missing remains. But I don't think that would derail the overall deal.
My colleague Norah O'Donnell had a fascinating conversation with former Secretary of State Condoleezza Rice and former Secretary of State Hillary Clinton this afternoon about this. I want to play sound from Secretary Rice and then Secretary Clinton, get your reaction.
I was glad to read that the United States is going to deploy 200 or so civil military personnel for civil military coordination, because we will have capabilities to help in getting people there, getting the humanitarian assistance organized. And so that's a step that we've not seen before.
Most importantly, the conflict hopefully will end with the ceasefire. The hostages will be returned. And then the very hard work of rebuilding Gaza, of finding the kind of security that Israel and the Palestinians, after Hamas, deserve to have, moving forward with the other points in the plan to try to create an opportunity for Palestinians to have a better life and for Israel to have greater peace and security.
So 2 points. Condoleezza Rice emphasizes some U.S. civil military personnel there on the ground. Important, she says, for expediting humanitarian assistance. Former Secretary of State Clinton saying hard work ahead, phase 2.
Both secretaries are right. Secretary Rice cited the civil military component of U.S. Central Command that's there. In fact, I was at the Pentagon at the end of the Biden administration, and we used something similar to help monitor the ceasefire achieved in Lebanon between Israel and Hezbollah. Now, these forces can help monitor the ceasefire. They can help
familiar with that work, in
very much facilitate the flow of aid and help facilitate, once there are international forces identified, not U.S., but to go into Gaza, they can help be enabled of that force. So that's very important that the U.S. military will be involved. And Secretary Clinton is also right that the real hard work of phase 2 has barely begun. Phase 1 is critical. This will end the war, bring enormous relief to the hostages, their families, and Palestinian civilians. But a major task awaits. How will Hamas be disarmed and ultimately removed from power? Without that next critical step, all of the remaining elements, getting reconstruction funding to flow so that Gaza can be rebuilt, getting the Palestinian Authority into Gaza so they can start to exercise authority, getting some kind of discussion going between Israelis and Palestinians about a political horizon. It identifies in President Trump's plan that includes a credible pathway to a Palestinian state down the line, no doubt. But none of those things will happen if Hamas still clings to power and still poses a threat to Israel or to continue to crush the people of Gaza.
And President Trump due to go to the region this weekend, and there's a summit planned in Egypt with lots of the key players discussing some of the very things you outlined. Mr. Ambassador, thank you very much for your time, as always.
Thanks, Major.
Over here. Thank you, Guy. Still to come, a federal grand jury has indicted another one of President Trump's critics. What we are learning about the charges brought against New York Attorney General Letitia James. And a judge temporarily blocks National Guard deployments in and around Chicago, finding federal law enforcement descriptions of tensions there are, quote, simply unreliable, unquote. Plus, here's the 4-1 on President Trump's polls. Not the 4-1-1. I know, I'm supposed to say 4-1. No. Trump's approval ratings hover right around 41%, and they do so pretty consistently. Is that a strength or a weakness? We will explore that. The Takeout returns in 90 seconds. Welcome back to the Takeout. New York Attorney General Letitia James has called the federal charges leveled against her baseless. Virginia grand jury Thursday indicted her on 1 count of bank fraud, 1 count of making false statements to a financial institution. James's first court appearance is scheduled for October 24th. CBS News Justice reporter Jake Rosen joins me now. Jake, briefly outline the charges.
Well, in making and buying, making a mortgage loan application and buying a house in Norfolk, Virginia, Letitia James allegedly, according to this complaint filed yesterday and secured by Lindsay Halligan, that controversial Trump appointee who was put in this to get an indictment against James Comey. She's continued what the work she can do in Virginia is that Letitia James said that she was buying a house for a primary purpose, when in reality, the Department of Justice is alleging she used it as a rental property. Now, in buying it as a property for herself, allegedly, that allowed her to get a better interest rate. It's about $18,900, which is minimal in the scheme of potential fraud, right? That the Department of Justice alleges she was able to essentially make from or successfully get from this deal in terms of saving money versus the loan she potentially should have gotten if she had actually put the correct information. Obviously, that's also lying to the bank because you allegedly did this wrong. Abby Lowell, her attorney back months ago, actually wrote a letter detailing why the Department of Justice was wrong. And Bill Pulte, the person who runs some housing mechanism in the government, who's pointed to a lot of the Trump foes, basically going line by line through the criminal complaint or criminal referral, I should say, of why this was wrong. So we'll see how this plays out in court.
Letitia James posted something about this yesterday. Let's watch it.
This is nothing more than a continuation of the president's desperate weaponization of our justice system. He is forcing federal law enforcement agencies to do his bidding.
My family and I have known for years that there are costs to standing up to Donald Trump, but we couldn't imagine ourselves living any other way. We will not live on our knees.
Put those two things together. The back one, James Comey, former FBI director, also referring to the indictment. You mentioned Lindsay Halligan. As I understand it, she was responsible for bringing this before the grand jury?
Single-handedly.
And also wrote the press release or something?
Yes, and because of the government shutdown that's been impacting so much of the Department of Justice's civil work, well, a lot of those press people, they are on furlough right now, and they're not able to work in the traditional ways that they would work to put this out in a more public-facing way with a career public press official. And our CBS News reporting does show that she brought this by herself. Certainly, she brought the James Comey indictment by herself as well, as she's kind of been left out in the ether a little bit, out from Department of Justice Maine, and bringing these, knowing how A, controversial they are, and B, knowing how many legal challenges this is going to face going forward in both of these cases.
And those representing the two accused have said, because the president posted on social media about it, there looks to be a cause and effect. Jake Rosen, thank you very much for your time. I appreciate it. National Guard still not on the streets of Chicago as the president had hoped. We're following the latest on various deployments in several different states. That's next here on The Takeout. Welcome back to The Takeout. 3 people were arrested this morning during protests outside an ICE facility in suburban Chicago, specifically Broadview. This, as a U.S. District Court judge issued a two-week restraining order blocking deployment of National Guard troops to protect the facility and immigration agents. This was the 4th judicial ruling this week that questioned the severity of the protests and the need for federalized forces to protect immigration actions broadly in Chicago and surrounding areas. Nicole Skanga joins me now. Nicole, always great to see you. Catch my audience up on what isn't and what is happening in Chicago and the greater Chicago area.
We've already seen some arrests, Major, earlier today in the Broadview area with Chicago police, the state law enforcement sort of pushing back a crowd of around 100 people there. But what's interesting is the National Guard is right now in the middle of a limbo. There was a federal judge who ruled to temporarily block the National Guard deployment just yesterday. And this was a wild ruling from the bench. The judge said she found DHS's assessment of recent events in Chicago to be unreliable, and went on to acknowledge that there's no doubt there have been acts of vandalism and assaults during these ongoing law enforcement actions in Chicago, but that she didn't think local police couldn't handle it. So now essentially you have 200 members of the Texas National Guard who have left their well-paying jobs down in the Lone Star State to go to Chicago, and they're sitting there not getting paid because we're in a government shutdown. We are told that they are training still, but you had 20 of them deployed outside of that Broadview facility just yesterday who had to turn back around and go back to the training.
And the judge, in talking about the lack of reliability in DHS representations, is doing what the Oregon federal district judge did, looked at what they regarded as the facts on the ground, other reporting from local law enforcement about what was going on and comparing them to representations made by the federal government and finding them widely divergent.
And as you know, the government appealed that, and it went before the appeals court yesterday.
In Oregon.
In Portland. And then that three-judge panel seemed to actually lean the other way, Major. So at first, obviously, the temporary restraining order came down, blocking any National Guard deployment to Oregon. But yesterday, and a few quotes stuck out to me. One of the judges, Judge Nelson, he's a Trump appointee, said, "It's not our job to second guess whether the president reasonably believed that officers were at risk." And the government kept pointing to the June 7th memo that the White House issued days before we saw the National Guard deployment to Los Angeles. And then, of course, the attorney for Oregon said, well, isn't that a little stale and outdated? And judges were skeptical, which was interesting to see. Judge Nelson went on to say it may well be that forces are used in an improper way, but we don't have evidence of that right now. All we have is a document that says we have a federal facility under attack. So a ruling from that court could come in days. It could be that the original decision to block the National Guard could be reversed, and it could have, an impact on some of these other cases we're seeing, including in Chicago.
And the legal dividing line could be, what is the federal power if the federal government believes something, regardless of whether it's actually happening on the ground, according to the representations of the local law enforcement.
Lots of deference to the president, Major.
No doubt. Nicole Skanga, thank you very, very much. With President Trump's polling numbers holding steady, which means in the low 40s, can Democrats do anything about that? And is that a possible warning sign for Republicans as we look toward the midterms? We're going to take a closer look at the numbers and what they might mean for the president's success and maybe his party's. Next, right here on The Takeout. Welcome back to Takeout. Thanks for hanging out with us. CBS News' most recent polling shows President Trump's approval rating basically unchanged. Right now, it's 42%. Been in that range since July. Broken down by top issues, majority of Americans disapprove of the president's handling of immigration, the economy, and inflation. I'm joined now by Carly Cooperman. She's CEO of Schoen Cooperman Research, also an opinion contributor for The Hill. Recently wrote a piece with the title, How Trump's Remarkably Consistent Polling Could Last or Fade. Not the greatest headline in the world. Most things last or fade in life, Carly. But beyond that, what is the significance for President Trump and Republicans that the president's polling data and approval ratings basically, regardless of the headlines, do not budge?
Look, there's something remarkable about what we're seeing. I mean, it's consistently underwater, the approval rating that Trump is having in the low 40s. It's not particularly strong by any means, but what's remarkable is that it has been stable, presiding over such a turbulent presidency that Trump has had. And that is in part to the fact that he has got a strong base of support that love him. Republicans are willing to give him to the benefit of the doubt, no matter almost anything that he does. However, at the same time, we are consistently seeing very negative ratings as it relates to the economy and inflation. These are two of the issues that helped propel Trump to victory, as he was able to convince voters that he could take on these issues better than Kamala Harris. And I think that this is something that is going to be a problem for him and or an opportunity for Democrats to capitalize on, given that I don't see his ratings improving in the long term. Now, the government shutdown is happening. This is something that thus far people aren't happy with, Democrats or Republicans, but there's still more blame put to Republicans. The healthcare impact and the conversation around healthcare is something that benefits Democrats as well. Also, Trump has consistently been negative on healthcare. And so there's openings for the Democrats if they are able to capitalize on those issues.
And attitudes matter, it seems to me, Carly, because every president I covered before Donald Trump would have been very nervous about a poll rating 41, 42, 40, even 43. He never has been. Not the first term, not this time around.
That's right. And the thing is, on the other hand, Democrats' ratings are very bad right now, and there's no way to spin that. And I think that's probably to some extent why Trump hasn't been worried or cared. He knows he has a strong base of support. He knows he was able to build a coalition that was quite shocking and unexpected from what we've seen. And, you see in the generic ballot, this is something that we closely watch. The Democrats have a small lead, but it's not as big as one would expect given where his ratings are. And it's been a struggle of the Democratic Party this year to figure out what the messages that they're going to coalesce around, how they can effectively take on Trump, and really how they can stand up to Republicans and present an alternative message that connects with voters.
Carly, does that surprise you, the continued Democratic inability to harness a message and rebound from that devastating loss in 2024?
You know, I think Trump is a president unlike one that we have ever seen before. And the way that he is able to change the focus of our country consistently with drastic approaches that are just really unprecedented has made it difficult, and more difficult than expected, for Democrats to come back on, something like immigration. Some of his efforts have been well received in that people, by the time Trump came into as president, people did believe that immigration had gotten out of control. They were worried about illegal immigration to some extent. But then the shock and awe of which he was doing things around there, with the National Guard coming into different cities. I mean, that's just one example. But I think the way that there's like whiplash in the country has made it more difficult for Democrats to figure that message. And also, quite frankly, they spent the first few months with the infighting in terms of figuring out there was a lot of blame, which direction to go from there. And so, it's something that's taken longer than I think is ideal for the party.
Carly Cooperman, thank you so much for your time. I appreciate it.
Thank you.
Government shutdown is threatening funding for free food programs. That could impact millions of families who depend on that program and related ones for important benefits. Despite a promise from the president and the White House suggesting that money would keep flowing even during the shutdown. We will explore that next here on The Takeout. Welcome back. The White House said this week that it will use tariff revenue during the government shutdown as bridge funding for a supplemental nutrition program known as WIC, or Women, Infants, and Children. That sounded promising to those who receive those benefits, and yet Vice President Vance said at yesterday's cabinet meeting, and when you play this sound, you'll see the cameras did not get a really good angle on him, that funding could expire really soon.
There's a low-income food program, the WIC program, that my mom actually used when I was a baby. That program is about to be underfunded, and it's about to get cut off because Chuck Schumer won't open the government.
I asked the WIC National Association's policy director, Ali Hart, about all of this yesterday. Take a listen. Ali, thanks for coming in. There are a lot of mixed signals from the administration. Caroline Leavitt, the press secretary, said that tariff revenue will be used as a stopgap to keep WIC funding going. Then the vice president said this week it's going to end. President hasn't really weighed in on it directly. What do you know, and what are the deadlines facing those who receive WIC assistance?
Sure. So right now on the ground, we know that states are really starting to struggle and feel the pain. We heard from one tribal agency that they told participants yesterday that they would be closing their clinics today and turning off benefits today. The good news is that overnight, USDA was able to get them a reallocation of prior fiscal year funds. So they've got a little money now, but that money won't last too long. We think they can get through maybe another week. And so that's why it's so important for us to find out what's going on with the White House tariff money that they have promised. At this point, we're really relieved to hear that they are making this funding available, but we need to know how much will be available, and we need to know when folks will get it, because right now states are under enormous stress and very close in some cases to running out.
And as I've read, it's about 7 million Americans are beneficiaries of women, infant, and children funding and assistance. It flows through the states, and the agency is the Department of Agriculture. Do I have that right?
Exactly correct. So we serve 6.9 million pregnant moms, postpartum moms, and then babies from birth all the way up to their 5th birthday. As of the last month we have data for, and that's this past May. That's right.
And that assistance not only is for the children living, but those who are in development, and there are real-world benefits from this assistance.
Absolutely. So this program, we call it sort of the original Food as Medicine program. It was developed by a pediatrician out of Johns Hopkins 50 years ago. And he started it because he was seeing babies born too early with low birth weight and even a really high rate of infant mortality at that time. So we're really proud to say that now, 50 years later, we have successfully reduced infant mortality, reduced preterm birth, reduced low birth weight, and improved maternal health outcomes in this nation. And so the stakes are very high for WIC. We need to keep the program going.
And what's been the experience in previous shutdowns?
Sure. So this shutdown is a little unique. It's more dire because it started at the beginning of the fiscal year. So WIC is a discretionary program, unlike some other nutrition programs where it's a mandatory entitlement.
Meaning the funding's guaranteed.
Right, exactly. WIC it's a discretionary program. So every year Congress has to provide new funds, and there's a cap on that. And so this year, coming at the top of the fiscal year, there was no new funding available for folks. And there's a little bit that they can take from last year, but very little because the program is actually increasing in participation, which is fantastic. But that does mean that we're spending more of our funding. And so there really wasn't much to pull over from the prior fiscal year.
And this funding is a hedge against inflation, is it not?
So
in some ways?
That's a good question. I think that we are dealing with inflation in terms of food costs. So it has, to the extent that inflation has increased grocery costs, WIC does pay for, we feel that impact on the WIC budget. So that is part of why actually there's less carryover funding going into this fiscal year is because we did have to spend more.
Higher prices eat into allocated
That's
reserve.
Right.
Thinking about the calendar, the month of October, when do dates start really becoming seriously problematic for your recipients?
Yeah, so we are already seeing in a couple of states, they are reducing clinic availability because there's actually two types of funds in WIC. There's food dollars, and then there's essentially nutrition services and administrative dollars. So states are in a better shape right now on food dollars because the federal government was able to make the contingency fund available for WIC. So that's what folks are working with right now. Last night, they got that reallocation, which is giving them a little bit of the admin side, but some are very tight. So we are seeing in Washington and Kansas, other places, we're seeing some clinic closures or significant reductions in staff or hours or services. So we're starting to see some of these impacts now. We're hoping that reallocation that folks got last night gets us maybe another week if it's kind of in the right places, as we hope it is. And then I think we really need the White House to get that money out that they're promising. It needs to go out next week so that we don't see large-scale disruptions.
Ali, thanks so much for coming in. I appreciate it very, very much.
Thank you, Major.
4 U.S. presidents have won the Nobel Peace Prize. President Trump is not one of them. The White House took unhappy notice of that today when the prize was awarded to a political dissident in Venezuela. We'll talk about that when we come back here on The Takeout. Welcome back to The Takeout. President Trump has campaigned for the Nobel Peace Prize, but he was passed over this year. Venezuelan opposition leader Maria Corina Machado received the prize for what the committee said was promoting democratic rights for the people of Venezuela. Trump called Machado today and congratulated her, saying she deserved the award. This after his administration denounced the very decision to award it to her in the first place. I'm going to bring in our political panel, Democratic strategist Megan Hayes and Republican strategist Rina Shah. So let's just level set this, go in the Wayback Machine, because this is one of the things that sticks in President Trump's craw, what I'm about to show you right now. Please play that of President Obama in 2009.
I would be remiss if I did not acknowledge the considerable controversy that your generous decision has generated. In part, this is because I am at the beginning and not the end of my labors on the world stage.
I covered that in Oslo. And Obama's basically like, I got the Nobel Peace Prize because I won an election. I haven't done anything. And he gave a big speech about all America's role in the moral, sometimes compulsion or necessity of great powers to engage in armed conflicts, so on and so forth. But that sticks in Trump's craw. Obama does nothing, gets a Nobel Peace Prize. He's doing all these things, trying to work things out, Ukraine, Israel, Gaza, nothing.
Well, his team is boasting that he's had 7 conflict resolutions since January.
That's a bit of a
stretch,
exaggeration,
right?
yes.
Okay, so
they would even acknowledge it privately.
they have said, well, those supporters of Trump will say he's had ceasefires in Gaza, he has brokered peace between Cambodia and Thailand. But what I love is that this committee said, you know what, we're going to go for the democracy fighter and not the deal-making flair here. And what this really proves is that time and time again, multilateral grit is going to win out over unilateral boasts, and I'm proud for it.
Yeah, I also think, just to level set, the submissions were due January 31st. So anything he did in office, that's great that Obama got his.
Try next year.
Exactly. So if the peace deal,
especially if the peace deal holds,
100%, then he would be a really good candidate. I do not want to take anything away from what's happening in Israel and Gaza right now, and he'd be an extremely good candidate. But the fact that this is like a core to who he is just weird to me, and they're obsessed with it. I almost wish they just would have given it to him so we just don't have to hear about it anymore.
So there was a debate for the Virginia governor's race last night. There's lots of sound. You can watch it all online. I just want to cut to your chase of the argumentation between Winsome Earl-Sears, the Republican nominee, Abigail Spanberger, the Democratic nominee, and where do you think this race currently sits and how much it matters in understanding where things are. Trump, first year, 2.0.
Well, anyone who watched could see that it was just interruptions over insight.
Yeah, I mean, over talking. A lot of Winsome and Earl-Sears jumping in.
I think the DNC put out something she interrupted 60 times, just while we're on that note.
Yeah.
For those counting at home.
Turning policy talk into a shouting match is what turns voters off. And Spanberger, she has a real opportunity here to go forward and just say, we need to talk about car tax. We need to talk about data centers. This is all stuff that Virginians care about. But when Winsome Sears wants to make it all about shouting, she, again, has that entry point. She's doing well. We're looking at her lead right now. Spanberger 52-42. I think that's a little close. I think it's a little close for comfort. But again, that 10 points, it could go anywhere right now. You've got early voters out as well. There's about 6% undecided. Those people could be swayed. I don't know what we're really looking at here, though, in terms of Trump's impact on this race. I really do think it is just these two women on their own.
Hasn't said a thing. And when she was in the front row at Newport News, he looked right at her, didn't say a thing.
Wild.
Called everyone else out. Megan.
So I don't think necessarily he has to have an actual impact where he says who he's for. I think Virginia is interesting because it is so impacted by what's going on in D.C. with DOJ cuts, and the federal government has such an impact in Northern Virginia, and then the military contingent in the down part of the state. And so I do think that Spanberger has an extremely good argument here about affordability, and with the DOJ cuts that I think is going to carry her over the line here more than anything.
Quickly, Megan, what about New Jersey in the governor's race there? Mikey Sherrill, the Democratic nominee, Jack Ciattarelli, the Republican. They're clashing as well. That race, according to some polls, pretty close.
Yeah, and the news coming out where he wants to sue her over something she said, it just screams, I'm Donald Trump. I want to hide behind lawsuits. Mikey Sherrill is in a really good spot. She's going to focus on lowering costs here, lowering the energy costs, and on her child safety act that she wants to do. I think that's a really big thing for parents, and I think it's something that New Jerseyans care about.
New Jerseyans.
People in New Jersey?
New Jersey. We're just going to go with it. Rena, very quickly, latest poll in New York City's mayor's race. Zohran Mamdani, 46%. Andrew Cuomo, 33%. 15% Curtis Sliwa, the Republican. Yeah. If Sliwa drops out, anyone could do that math. It might be close.
I think it will be close, actually. I don't know that these polls are really gauging anything except for youth momentum. And so I believe Sliwa needs to drop out. I think Eric Adams did the right thing. Cuomo's got the Jewish community support. Mamdani, again, the free buses, free everything. That stuff turns out a lot of young
Megan,
voters.
You got 30 seconds.
It may get them in a poll, but does it get young people to turn out? And I think that's the key question. And Cuomo allegedly is raising a lot of money in some of his super PACs right now. So I think people are waiting for Curtis to drop out.
Mm-hmm. Yet again, the race will come down to that magic word. Turn out. Megan Hayes, Rena Shaw, always a pleasure. Remember, the candy does not eat itself, so get your hands in there. All right, we made it through the week, folks. I'm as relieved about that as you are. Happy Friday, everyone. This is The Takeout. Relentlessly curious, reliably civil, occasionally clever. The report starts now.